South Sydney Rabbitohs, Mal, are imploding. Yes, imploding. Now, I would love to get your thoughts as a looking from the outside, but knowing a lot of the personalities involved. What's been your take on the last couple of days, or maybe even before that, given the performances of the South Sydney Rabbitohs?
As a wise old man once said in rugby league, defence is attitude.
Yeah.
And from the start of the year when they're leading the competition to where they are now, defensively, they don't deserve to be in the final eight, to be brutally honest, but there's a chance of them making it. So it's got to be an attitude thing, Jimmy, honestly. It can't be any more than that, So it's good. And I think it's not just on a couple of players or the coach or in the coaching staff. I think it's an all-of-club issue, particularly around the football department. And I just feel that they're not working hard enough for each other, to get the job done, and particularly defensively. And they haven't been. I'm not quite sure what the stats would say, but they'll be one of the worst teams defensively in the last bit of the season. So they need to change an attitude. And once they get the attitude, it's nothing to do with talent.
Yes.
Nothing to do with their skill set. Nothing to do with the players in the club. It's more to do with what's in between their ears. And if they get that right, they can go on a run that could win this competition.
Yeah. Well, the only people happy about what's happening at South Sydney is the fact that Anthony Seibold and Tony Mestroff at the Manly Seagulls now don't have to deal with all the Josh Schuster stuff, which was going to be happening.
Exactly. Or Benji Marshall with the Tigers.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But the point I made about Josh Schuster on Tuesday was that this is right. This is... we teach our kids, okay, to achieve anything, you have to make sacrifice. Talent is one thing, but making sacrifice and working hard is the bigger part of it, which is proven to be correct. Bang, that's correct with Josh Schuster at the Manly Seagulls. So is that, do you think, what Sam Burgess was talking about meeting expectations and maintaining standards at training that he thinks is not happening, that has then led to his exit?
Well, attitude and character is a reflection of the leadership, to be honest with you, So I say that in my experience, it has to be an attitude thing. It has to be something that is not happening between the ears. So that character and that willingness to do whatever to win footy games in this instance, it's reflected in the whole of group. So, but your leadership is the paramount thing to get that all right, So, I'm just from looking outside, Sam, my beliefs, you hear what people say is that he has high standards and he lives by those standards and he abides by those standards and he talks by those standards. So he's, he walks the talk. Are the rest of the club doing that? Are the rest of the footy team doing that? I'm unsure, but. Attitude is a reflection of the environment that you're in.
Yeah. So there was allegations of leaking and all of that sort of stuff. But, the central figures in this are clearly outside of the coaching staff, Latrell Mitchell and Cody Walker. You know Latrell better than most. You've coached him through a World Cup. Can you give us an insight into Latrell and his application and how you worked with that?
Yeah, firstly, before we even get into that, Jimmy, it's really important to understand that every club, every coach, it's not even favourites. They're trying to get the best out of their people. They're trying to get the best out of the playing group, and not everyone's the same. Everyone's unique. So, to get the best out of your best player, which is Latrell Mitchell, sometimes you've got to do it a bit differently. You've got to do it more wisely and smartly. So, if that doesn't reflect what the other group, well, most of the group are doing, or if the group does accept that, well, then you just move on with your day. You've got to solve that. You've got to solve that. So let's get one thing right, or clear from my point of view, is that everyone doesn't get treated equally at any club that I've been involved in. It has its different personalities that you have to treat uniquely, and that's really important to get the best out of people. And that's why the best coaches in the game are your Wayne Bennett's, your Trent Robinsons, your Craig Bellamy's, who do that on a regular basis. So then, obviously, the whole group's got to buy into that as well. Yeah. So you don't blame the individuals. You blame the acceptance of the standards in that group. What is accepted, and I think that's probably the conversation that needs to happen. But because I know under Wayne, when I was coached by Wayne, there were different standards for different people. We just accepted all that,
Yeah.
And I was probably one of those Latrell Mitchell guys who probably got more sway than anyone else at the club.
Yep.
But it was just the way it is, and then, but you put back into the team as well, don't you? So I think that's really important message for everyone to understand, is that not everyone's equal in a team, as long as the team buys into that inequality.
Yeah,
I guess.
We used to have Will Sinclair, the former Sydney Swans player, on the program last year, and he used to talk about John Longmire, and he's got a playing group with arguably one of the greatest players of all time in Buddy Franklin walking. And he used to say to them, I won't treat you equally, but I'll treat you all fairly.
Fairly, yes.
Yeah. So
I think that's a really good point. That's a really good saying, and that's probably more the crux of it all.
Yeah.
If you've got sooks in your club complaining about it all the time, well, it's not so much the player that is being treated fairly, but not equally. I think you've got to start to move those players on, because they need to buy into the system.
Okay, so here's my question to you. Did you have to treat Latrell differently last year? Did you have to treat any player during that incredible run that you had in State of Origin differently to make it work within the group?
Well, we had a set of standards, Jimmy, that we all abide by and we all discussed. So everyone agrees with that we had a common purpose. We had a set of values that were really important. We had a goal that we wanted to work towards. So there's that commonality there.
Yep.
So everyone bought into that, but then you treat everyone uniquely. So you've got to try to get the best out of your individuals in that footy team. So you have different conversations. I have a different conversation with Latrell than I have with James Tedesco is a really good example. I had a different conversation with Nathan Cleary than I had with someone like Benny Hunt. So it varies. It varies from player to player, as long as everyone understands what the purpose is, understands what our standards or values and behaviours are, and understands what our goal is, and we're all working hard towards that.
Yeah. Did you have a situation, and because this was the point that I made last week on the Friday when it came to light about Latrell being at the Luke Combs concert and shotgunning a beer and all that's put aside if they go out and play well on Sunday. Like, I
mean, it's a great example. It's a great example of, people outside the organisation seeing a particular incident that is newsworthy.
Yeah.
I heard Jason Demetrio talk yesterday that he turned up to train the next morning. He was the first one there. Did all his work he needed to get and trained really well. So that's what I garner from that whole incident. You got to go out and have fun, Jimmy. You just can't. You just can't sort of sit at home all the time and muse over how you're going to play. You got to have a life as well outside of that. And if I know that Latrell loves Luke Combs because we had that music played so many times on tour, it wasn't funny, So, but every other player in the team loved it as well, So all the Penrith guys loved it. And,
right.
But it doesn't affect who you are or the person you are or your playing ability. It's just someone sees something that they feel is not the right behaviour lead into a game of rugby league, So. There'll be millions of those examples, I would suggest to you.
Yeah, well, it's exactly. How long we got? We only got the hour. So,
I just think you're trying to reach. You're trying to reach for something that's, that's going to be a good storyline for this particular story.
Yep. So the other thing about it is too that I've always maintained is that having been a young player and looking up to players like a Craig Salvatore, for example.
Yep.
Your senior players are the most important people in your organisation. Now, your coach puts your senior players there, but if you're a younger player, if a senior player says jump, it was always how high, right? You just do whatever. So if they're setting really good standards at training, then there's the expectations that you follow. It can work in reverse, right, if the standards aren't there. So from your point of view...
if the standards are too high sometimes and you can't attain it, so how's that affect your confidence? So there's a balancing act there, isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you want to set really high standards, but the expectation on those young people shouldn't be as high as your leadership group either. Really, I mean,
Yeah.
what has Latrell done by going to a Luke Coombs concert and had a shot of beer? How's that affect the way he plays, and how's that affect his leadership qualities?
Well,
I mean, and then as was reported, there was a whole heap of NRL players there.
Yeah. But there was only one shotgunning a beer on stage on the Wednesday.
Yeah, but how's that affect his performance, though?
So, and as I said, if he came out on the Sunday and played really strongly against Newcastle, then you wouldn't even think twice about it. But
I agree with that too, but there's 16 other players in their footy team.
And totally agree with that.
They didn't perform to the best of their capabilities either. And that's that thing we go back to, that attitude thing, you know. So it's not, you know, it's quite easy to build some stats. It's quite easy to show some footage. It's quite easy to, in the media you can see Latrell walking on a footy field. It's pretty easy to get that and then build a story around it all. I reckon I could, every player in the competition, I could build some stats to form a story about why he isn't doing things well enough. And I can do a bit of footage up of every player in the competition walking at some stage in the game.
Yeah. No, I think that is absolutely a very fair comment. His stats at halftime, Latrell, at halftime were really good.
His run numbers were excellent.
Yes.
Which tells you that he was effective when he did have the ball. He's a different type of fullback. There's this expectation at times with fullbacks that you are the James Tedesco, and the effort on effort is of high quality. You know, that's what the Dylan Edwards gets raves about. But you look at Kalen and you look at Reece Walsh, they're not effort on effort players.
No.
When they get the ball, they make things and create things out of that. You know, so you look at Reece Walsh. Sorry, he might only have 10 or 11 runs a game.
Yeah,
but it's the quality of those runs. Carlin's playing the best footy he's ever played at the moment. He might have a dozen runs, where Teddy's 22 runs and Dylan Edwards is 21 runs, and Clint Gutherson's in the 20s as well. It's just they're different fullbacks. Latrell has a dozen runs and he makes over 100 metres, but the other thing about Latrell is that he's one of the best defensive fullbacks in the game. So you look at, if you want to bring stats into it, and he saves more tries than most fullbacks in the competition.
Yep.
And so you can bring stats and footage into arguments that will support that particular argument, but coaches and players that look at people in your playing group appreciate what Latrell done. He's a different fullback to everyone else.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Gutho, because he gets in contact with me all the time if you're missing out with it.
I threw it in today because I've got a big sign on the wall here. Please mention Gutho. Please.
I know he's
that.
listening. All right. Now, I know you're the coach and you're not the sole selector, but let's assume Latrell Mitchell misses the top 8 with the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Are you going to pick him for the games for the Kangaroos?
I will, provided he's available and he wants to. That's the other thing about International Rugby League and the workload of players, particularly this year. More rounds, obviously off the back of World Cup. The availability, I think, is going to be a bit not an issue, but it's going to be a big question. You start to ask the players, and the clubs obviously want to get their players back fit and healthy for the start of next year. So you've got to manage that process really well. So I'm hoping that Latrell is available, to play for in the green and gold, and I'll certainly across the selection table. I'll certainly be pushing him to stay involved. I mean, I've sort of, it's not that, it's around loyalty. So these players won the World Cup last year.
Yep. And
it's stuff off the back of 3 years absence from the international program. So for me, this is who I am. I've got to reward those players.
Yeah.
Regardless, I know they're going to play well for me. I know they're going to play well in the green and gold colours. They're passionate about playing for their country. So I know that Latrell, if he's available and he's fit and healthy, I know that I can pick him at 3, play left centre, and play extremely well in the Australian jersey because he's got heaps of pride for his country colours, and I know that if I pick him, he'll be at his best.
I want to ask you this before we get to a break, Johnny Shark, and you had a really interesting thing to say about ego prior to the show. Hey, Jimmy and Mal, is it risky to massage a player's ego to the point where it affects the rest of the team?
No, we don't do that. Ego's healthy in my mind, and I talk to teams about this, Jimmy. So ego's great. I'm really happy that they're all got egos because they actually believe in themselves. Ego is good. It's a healthy trait to have because.
Yep.
But there's the ego thing is around self-confidence and arrogance. If you're self-confident about who you are and the way the person you are and how you play, I think that's really healthy. If you're arrogant, well, then you've got an issue. And I think the thing that I sort of put a line in, it's around humility. It's around if you've got a good heart. Are you the person that everyone wants to play with? Are you the person that you'll put in for your teammates, things like that. So that's where I start to draw the line. If you're arrogant and you can't be told anything and you've got excuses for everything for not performing at the best of your ability, well, then you've got a problem with you, and then that problem obviously will then resonate into the footy team, and it's not the right trait to have for any team to have success, or the ultimate success, which is playing the best on game day at any given time.
Have you had, during the course of your playing career and or coaching career, a player who you perceived as arrogant at the time, conversation, and then a change in that behaviour?
I mentioned Jimmy, ego's healthy, and being self-confident at times, and then you might flip over. It's a fine line to flip to the arrogance side. But what I find when I talk to people in general, not only players, but people in general, if they got a good heart, they got a sense of community about them, they'll go out of way to do things for a fallen mate or someone or some sort of cause.
Yep.
I find they will change their ways from arrogance into that self-confident, do anything for you type character that you want in a team environment.
Yeah, which is vital in that team.